Everyone at the Andromeda Military Institute laughed when the tiny human walked into class. None of us knew she carried a mark only earned by survivors of a siege that killed 80,000 soldiers. I have seen a lot of strange things in my 3 cycles at the Andromeda Military Institute. I have watched a Vorlaxian accidentally launch himself through a reinforced window during zero-gravity training. I have seen a Clixon eat an entire month's worth of ration packs in one sitting, just to prove a point. I have even witnessed Professor Quentix lose his temper so badly that his head crest turned purple and started smoking. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day Riley Nakamura walked into advanced combat theory. My name is Velcor, by the way. I am a Threxian, which means I have 4 eyes, 6 limbs, and a natural talent for seeing trouble before it arrives. That last part is not just metaphorical. My species evolved on a planet where predators came from literally every direction, so we developed extra eyes on the sides of our heads. Comes in handy during exams when you want to see if the student next to you has the right answer. Not that I would ever do that. Anyway, it was 3rd period on a rotation day, which is what we call the worst day of the academic week. Advanced combat theory with Professor Quentix, a 12-foot-tall chromath who believed that mercy was a communicable disease. The classroom was packed with about 40 students, all of us crammed into adaptive seating pods that supposedly adjusted to our unique physiologies. Mine always pinched my lower back segments, but complaining to the administration was like shouting into the void. Less productive, actually, because at least the void does not send you an automated response telling you to submit a form. We were 15 minutes into the lecture when the door hissed open. Everyone turned to look. Well, everyone except Bront, the Vorlaxian who sat in the back row and was already asleep. That guy could fall asleep during an artillery bombardment, I swear. And there she was, human. You could tell immediately, even if you had never seen one before. They have this distinctive look about them. 2 eyes, bilateral symmetry, hair growing out of their heads like some kind of decorative moss. This one was small by human standards, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back into what I later learned was called a ponytail. She wore the standard institute uniform, the gray and blue combat fatigues that somehow looked both too big and too small on her frame at the same time. Professor Quentix stopped mid-sentence. His head crest flattened against his skull, which was his version of raising an eyebrow. You are 23 minutes late, cadet. The human did not flinch, did not apologize, just nodded once and said, yes sir. Navigation error. It will not happen again. Her voice was steady, calm, like being late to a class taught by a professor who once made a student run laps around the entire campus for sneezing was no big deal. Several of my classmates started chittering, which is the universal sign for suppressed laughter in about 15 different species. Thrace, a Clixon who sat 2 rows ahead of me, clicked his mandibles together in amusement. Even I felt a smirk forming on my facial plates. Humans. From a Class 10 Deathworld. Sure, but look at her. She probably weighed less than my field pack. One good wind gust and she would blow away like a dust particle. Professor Quentix gestured toward an empty pod near the front. Find a seat, Cadet Nakamura. Try to keep up. More chittering, more mandible clicking. Riley, as I would come to know her, walked down the aisle between the seating pods. That was when I noticed it. As she passed under one of the overhead lights, something on her left hand caught the illumination. A mark of some kind. Dark lines that curved and intersected across the back of her hand, extending just slightly past her wrist. At first, I thought it was a scar. We all had scars. Combat training was not exactly gentle, but as she moved, I realized it was too deliberate, too precise. The lines formed patterns. Symbols maybe. Or a design. A tattoo. Humans did that sometimes, I remembered from the cultural briefings. Injected pigment under their skin to create permanent images. Seemed painful and pointless, but then again humans thought the same thing about our molting rituals. So who was I to judge? Riley slid into her pod without another word. The seat adjusted with a mechanical whir, and she placed both hands flat on the desk surface in front of her. The tattoo was partially visible now, though I could not make out the complete design from my angle. It looked almost like it was moving, but that had to be a trick of the light. Professor Quentix resumed his lecture about flanking maneuvers and defensive perimeter establishment. Riley pulled out a datapad and began taking notes like she had not just been publicly called out in front of the entire class. I glanced around. Most of my classmates had already dismissed her. Just another human trying to prove they belonged in a galaxy that had been running just fine without them for thousands of cycles. But something about that tattoo bothered me. It looked familiar somehow, like I should recognize it. Professor Quentix pulled up a holographic display that filled half the classroom. A three-dimensional battlefield materialized in front of us, complete with terrain features, defensive positions, and little glowing markers representing military units. He was in his element now, pacing back and forth on his massive legs, his head crest fully extended in what passed for excitement among chromaths. Territorial defense, he announced, his voice booming through the room like thunder trapped in a metal box. The foundation of all military strategy. You hold what is yours. You fortify. You establish kill zones and fallback positions. You make the enemy pay for every inch of ground they take. He manipulated the hologram with a gesture, and the defensive positions began to glow brighter. Standard doctrine calls for layered defenses. Primary line, secondary line, tertiary line. When one position becomes untenable, you execute a controlled retreat to the next prepared position. Orderly, measured, disciplined. I was taking notes, all four of my eyes tracking different parts of the display simultaneously. This was basic stuff, really. Every military academy in the galaxy taught the same principles: defense in depth, mutual support, controlled withdrawal when necessary. That was when Riley raised her hand. Professor Quentix paused, his massive head swiveling toward her. Yes, Cadet Nakamura, sir. What if the retreat protocols are what the enemy is counting on? The room went very, very quiet. Quentix's head crest flattened slightly. Explain. Riley gestured toward the hologram. If defensive doctrine is standardized across the galaxy, then any competent enemy commander will already know exactly how you will respond to pressure. They will know you will fall back from the primary line to the secondary. They will predict your movements because you are following the manual. Thrace clicked his mandibles again, louder this time. A few other students joined in. I heard someone mutter something in Vorlaxian that roughly translated to typical Deathworlder logic. Professor Quentix, to his credit, did not immediately shut her down. And what would you suggest instead, Cadet? That we abandon sound military doctrine in favor of improvisation? No, sir. Riley leaned forward slightly, and I noticed her left hand clenching into a fist on the desk. I am suggesting that sometimes the correct tactical decision is to not retreat at all. Hold the primary line past the point where doctrine says to fall back. Make the enemy commit resources based on the assumption that you will behave predictably. Then, when they have overextended, you counterattack from a position they thought you had already abandoned. The chittering grew louder. A Clixon 2 rows behind me actually laughed out loud. A harsh buzzing sound that made my head ache. Oh, this is rich, Thrace said, not even bothering to lower his voice. The human thinks she knows better than thousands of cycles of military theory. Tell me, Cadet, how many real battles have you fought? How many actual combat deployments? Riley did not turn around, did not acknowledge him, just kept her eyes on Professor Quentix, but her hand clenched tighter. And I swear, I absolutely swear, the tattoo moved, the lines shifted, reorganized. The pattern seemed to pulse with a faint luminescence that had not been there a moment before. It was so subtle that I almost thought I imagined it, but I have 4 eyes and all 4 of them saw the same thing. What in the name of the ancients was that thing? Professor Quentix studied Riley for a long moment. His head crest remained flat, which meant he was either very angry or very interested. With chromaths, those two states looked remarkably similar. Your suggestion would result in higher casualties among defenders. The retreat protocol exists to preserve fighting strength. With respect, sir, dead ground does not care about your fighting strength. Riley's voice remained steady, but there was an edge to it now. Sharp, cold, and an enemy who thinks they have already won is an enemy making mistakes. I found myself staring at her, really staring. Who talks to Professor Quentix like that? Who questions foundational military doctrine in front of an entire class? Either this human was incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, and I was not sure which possibility concerned me more. Around me, my classmates were having a field day. Bront had actually woken up and was chuckling, a deep rumbling sound that vibrated through the floor. A Threxian female named Kesix leaned over and whispered to her podmate, loud enough for half the class to hear. Maybe things are different on her primitive little world. Maybe they just throw rocks at each other until someone gives up. More laughter, more mandible clicking. Riley sat perfectly still. Her hand slowly unclenched, and as it did, the tattoo seemed to fade back to normal, just dark lines on pale skin. Nothing special. Nothing threatening, but I had seen it, and now I could not stop staring at it. Professor Quentix finally spoke. We will table this discussion for now. However, Cadet, I suggest you focus on learning established doctrine before attempting to reinvent it. There are reasons these protocols exist, and most of those reasons are written in the blood of soldiers who learned the hard way. He turned back to the hologram, dismissing her without another word. Riley lowered her hand and went back to taking notes, and I sat there, all four eyes locked on that tattoo, wondering what exactly I was looking at, because that was not just ink under skin, that was something else entirely. Professor Quentix let the uncomfortable silence hang in the air for exactly 10 seconds. I counted, then he clapped his massive hands together with a sound like a gunshot, and every student in the room jerked upright in their pods. Enough theory, he announced, his head crest rising again. Time for practical application. Everyone up. We are moving to the simulation bay. Oh no. Oh no. Surprise simulation exercises were Quentix's favorite form of psychological warfare. No preparation time. No chance to review tactics or form strategies with your usual partners. Just pure, unfiltered chaos designed to separate the competent from the completely hopeless. The entire class groaned in unison, which was actually impressive given that we had 17 different species represented in the room. Groaning in synchronized misery was apparently a universal constant. We filed out of the classroom and down 3 levels to the simulation bay, a massive chamber filled with haptic pods that could recreate any combat environment the computer could generate. And let me tell you, the Institute's computers had incredibly sadistic imaginations. Professor Quentix stood at the entrance, his datapad in hand, already pulling up random team assignments. We will be running urban combat scenarios today. Defend and extract protocols. You will be paired in teams of 2. He started reading off names. Thrace and Kesix. Bront and Valcor. I glanced at Bront, who was still half asleep but gave me a lazy nod. Great. My partner was a Vorlaxian who thought consciousness was optional. This was going to go well. Quentix continued down the list, pairing off students with the efficiency of someone who genuinely did not care if the combinations made any tactical sense, which, knowing him, was entirely intentional. Real combat did not give you the luxury of choosing your squad mates. Finally, he reached to the end of the list. Everyone had a partner. Everyone except Riley. She stood off to the side, hands clasped behind her back, expression completely neutral. 40 students in the class, an even number, except we had started the term with 41, and someone had washed out last week after a particularly brutal zero-gravity exercise. I had forgotten about that. Professor Quentix looked up from his datapad, his 4 nostrils flaring slightly. Cadet Nakamura, it appears you are without a partner. Yes, sir. You have 3 options. He held up one massive finger. 1. You sit out this exercise and receive a 0 for participation. 2. You observe and submit a tactical analysis report worth half credit. Or 3. He paused, and I swear his lips pulled back into what might have been a smile. Chromath should not smile. It looks wrong. You face 3 opponents instead of 1 team. The bay went dead silent. Someone, I think it was Kesix, actually gasped. 3 against 1. In a combat simulation. That was not just difficult, that was suicide. The scenarios were designed for 2 versus 2 engagements. 3 combatants against 1 meant overwhelming firepower, superior positioning, and basically no chance of survival. Riley did not hesitate. I will take option 3, sir. The laughter started immediately. Thrace was practically wheezing, his mandibles clicking so fast they blurred together. Oh, this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. The human who questions retreat protocols wants to fight a 3-on-1 simulation. Please let me be one of the 3. Bront actually woke up fully for the first time all day. I volunteer. This I have to see. Even Kesix, who was normally pretty reserved, was grinning with all 3 of her mouth segments. Same. Put me in, Professor. Professor Quentix consulted his datapad. Very well. Cadet Nakamura will face Cadets Thrace, Bront, and Velcor in Scenario 7. Urban environment. Hostile territory. Extraction protocol. Nakamura, you will be defending a high-value target location. The other 3 will be attacking to neutralize or capture. Standard simulation rules apply. Non-lethal force only, obviously, but the pain feedback is set to 60% realism. Wait, what? Sir, I said, raising one of my hands. I did not actually volunteer. You did not object either, Cadet Velcor. Consider this a learning opportunity. His head crest flattened, and what I had learned meant the discussion was over. Everyone else will run their assigned scenarios simultaneously. You have 5 minutes to gear up. Move. The class scattered toward the equipment lockers, chattering and laughing. I found myself walking next to Thrace and Bront, both of whom looked like they had just been told it was their hatching day. "This is going to be embarrassing," Thrace said. "For her, I mean 3-on-1. She will be eliminated in under 2 minutes. Bront cracked his neck, a sound like breaking wood. "Maybe 1 minute. Humans are fragile. I saw a documentary once where one of them broke a bone just from falling down. Can you imagine?" I was not really listening. I was watching Riley. She had moved to the equipment locker designated for her scenario and was pulling on the haptic suit in silence. The suit was designed to provide sensory feedback during the simulation. Hits would register as impacts. Simulated weapons fire would feel like actual pressure and heat. It was as close to real combat as you could get without actual danger of death. Riley sealed the suit and flexed her hands, testing the fit, and that was when she touched the tattoo. It was a deliberate gesture. She pressed her right hand against the back of her left, fingers covering the dark lines. Her eyes closed for just a moment. Her lips moved, like she was saying something, but no sound came out. Then she opened her eyes, dropped her hands and walked toward the simulation pod. The tattoo was glowing again, faintly, but definitely glowing, blue light pulsing in time with what I assumed was her heartbeat. "What the hell was that thing?" "Velcor, move it," Bront called from his pod. "I want to get this over with so I can watch the replay. This is going to be hilarious." I shook myself out of my staring and hurried to my own pod. The simulation would start in less than a minute. I needed to focus. 3-against-1 meant easy victory. Overwhelming odds, simple tactics. So why did I have this feeling in my gut, this little voice in the back of my mind, that we had just made a terrible mistake? I climbed into the pod. The system sealed around me, and the world dissolved into light. The simulation materialized around me in layers. First the ground, cracked concrete and scattered debris. Then the buildings, gray and brown structures that looked like they had been through a war already. Burn marks on the walls, shattered windows, the kind of urban environment where every corner could hide an enemy and every shadow was a potential death trap. I checked my gear. Standard issue pulse rifle, 3 magazines, 2 concussion grenades and a combat knife. The haptic suit registered everything perfectly. I could feel the weight of the weapon in my hands, the pressure of the grenades on my belt. A heads-up display flickered to life in my vision. Courtesy of the neural interface every cadet got implanted during orientation. Green markers indicated Thrace's position 30 meters to my left, and Bront's hulking form 60 meters to my right. We formed a loose triangle around the target building, a 3-story structure at the center of the map that Riley was supposed to be defending. "Comms check," Thrace's voice crackled in my ear. "Velcor, you reading me?" "Affirmative." "Bront?"
Yeah, I am here."
The Vorlaxian sounded bored already. "Can we just rush her? 3-on-1. This is stupid easy." "Negative," I said, my tactical training kicking in despite my nervousness. "We do this properly. Standard suppression and advance. Thrace, you have the speed advantage. You flank left and draw her fire. Bront, you push center with your armor advantage. I will provide covering fire and advance on the right." "Look at Velcor, suddenly a tactical genius," Thrace clicked. But I heard him moving through the rubble. "Fine. On your mark." I raised my rifle and moved toward the nearest piece of cover, a collapsed wall that gave me a clear view of the target building's entrance. My hearts, both of them, were hammering in my chest. This was just a simulation, just training. The pain would not be real. The failure would be, though, and I really did not want to be the one who messed up a 3-versus-1 advantage. "Mark," I whispered. Thrace burst from cover, his 6 legs carrying him across the broken ground in a skittering sprint. He was fast. I had to give him that. Clixons could move when they wanted to. He fired as he ran, pulse rounds stitching across the building's facade, smashing through already broken windows. Bront charged straight up the middle, roaring like the evolutionary throwback he was. Vorlaxians believed that intimidation was half the battle. The ground actually shook under his feet. His rifle was almost comically small in his massive hands, but he knew how to use it. Suppressing fire hammered into the building's ground floor. I moved right, staying low, using the rubble for cover. My rifle was up, my 4 eyes scanning for movement. Standard 3-pronged assault, textbook execution. Riley was one person. She could not possibly cover all 3 angles at once. Nothing moved in the building. No return fire. No defensive response at all. "Where is she?" Bront growled. He had reached the building's entrance and was pressed against the wall beside the doorway. I do not see anything. She has to be inside, Thrace replied. He had made it to a pile of rubble about 10 meters from the building's left side, probably waiting for us to enter. Classic ambush setup. I kept advancing, my eyes tracking every window, every opening. Something was wrong. You do not just let an attacking force get into position without contesting it. Even in a defensive scenario, you harass the advance. You make them pay for every meter. Riley was letting us get into position unopposed. Why? Bront, hold position, I said. Something is not right. What is not right is that we are wasting time, Bront shot back. I am going in. Wait. Do not. He did not wait. He turned and crashed through the doorway, his massive frame filling the entrance. His rifle was up, scanning left and right. That was when the window above him exploded outward. Riley dropped from the second floor like a stone, her body tucked into a controlled fall. She hit the ground directly behind Bront, rolled, came up in a crouch, and fired 3 times before I could even process what had happened. The pulse rounds took Bront in the back, right between his shoulder blades where his armor was weakest. His haptic suit registered the hits with brutal efficiency. He roared in pain, the 60% feedback feeling like someone had just stabbed him with white-hot irons, and went down to one knee. Riley was already moving. She vaulted over Bront's collapsing form and sprinted into the building. Contact. Thrace screamed. She is inside, she is inside. I swung my rifle toward the doorway but held my fire. Bront was in the way, clutching his back and cursing in 3 different languages. Shooting through him would register as a friendly fire incident and disqualify me from the exercise. Bront, move, I shouted. He stumbled to the side, still cursing. His suit was flashing red across his back, indicating compromised armor. 3 hits, precise, professional. She had known exactly where to shoot. Thrace was already moving, circling toward a side entrance. I am going around. Velcor, you and Bront take the front. We flush her toward my position. Bront is compromised, I said, moving forward while keeping my rifle trained on the building. His back armor is gone. 1 more hit there and he is eliminated. Then he should not get hit again, Thrace snapped. Helpful. Really helpful. I reached the entrance and pressed against the wall exactly where Bront had been seconds before. The building's interior was dark, shadows pooling in every corner. My enhanced vision could pick out shapes, furniture, debris, but no clear targets. Where was she? I risked a quick glance inside. A lobby of some kind. Stairs leading up on the left. A hallway extending back into darkness on the right. Multiple doorways, multiple angles, multiple positions. A defender's paradise, an attacker's nightmare. My rifle was slick in my hands. I realized I was sweating, which was not supposed to happen in simulations. The temperature was regulated, but my body did not care. My body knew danger when it sensed it. I am in position, Thrace reported. Side entrance is clear. I am moving to the 2nd floor. Copy, I said. Then quieter. Bront, can you move? Yeah. He limped up beside me, his rifle held in one hand. He looked shaken. Good. Maybe that would make him more careful. That little Deathworlder got lucky. That was not luck, I said, because it was not. That drop, that roll, those shots, that was training. Real training. The kind you get from actual combat, not from academy simulation. I glanced down at my own hand, the one not holding the rifle. Then I thought about Riley's hand, about that tattoo, about how it had been glowing when she walked into the simulation pod. Velcor, you coming? Thrace's voice in my ear. Or are you going to stand there all day? I took a breath, 2 breaths, actually, with both of my respiratory systems. Moving in. Stay sharp. I entered the building. The darkness swallowed me whole. And somewhere in that darkness Riley Nakamura was waiting. I made it 3 steps before I heard the sound. A soft clicking. Rhythmic. Like someone tapping their fingers against metal. No, not tapping. Not fingers. I looked up. Riley was on the ceiling, clinging to an exposed support beam like gravity was optional. Her eyes locked onto mine. Her left hand was pressed flat against the metal beam, and the tattoo was glowing bright enough now that I could see it clearly. Blue light. Pulsing. Alive. She smiled. Then she dropped. I tried to bring my rifle up. I really did, but she was so much faster than she had any right to be. Her boot caught me in the chest. The haptic suit screamed feedback. Pain exploded through my torso. I flew backward, crashed into Bront, and we both went down in a tangle of limbs. My rifle clattered away. Riley landed in a crouch between us. Her hand, that glowing hand, touched the ground, and the tattoo flared so bright I had to close 2 of my eyes. What the hell is that? Bront roared. Riley looked at him. Just looked at him, and in that moment I understood. We had not made a mistake volunteering for this fight. We had made the worst mistake of our lives. Riley moved like physics was a suggestion rather than a law. She pivoted on her left foot, her glowing hand sweeping in an arc that left tracers of blue light in the air. Bront swung at her with his massive fist, a blow that should have connected, should have sent her flying across the room. She leaned back exactly far enough for his knuckles to pass millimeters from her face. I could see the air distortion from the force of his punch. Then she was inside his guard. 2 strikes. Palm to his solar plexus. Elbow to his jaw. Bront's haptic suit lit up like a festival display. He staggered backward, gasping, his health indicator dropping to 15%. Velcor. A little help, he wheezed. I scrambled for my rifle, my hands shaking. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. Humans were not supposed to move like that. They were slow, predictable, limited by their 2 eyes and their fragile bone structure. I grabbed the rifle, swung it toward Riley. She was already gone. Above you. Thrace screamed in my ear. I looked up just in time to see Riley launch herself off a support beam, using it like a springboard. She twisted in midair, her body moving through a rotation that should have been impossible without wings or anti-gravity assistance. Her foot came down on my rifle, driving it toward the ground with such force that my grip broke. She landed beside me, her left hand shooting out to touch my shoulder. The tattoo flared, and suddenly I could not move. Not paralyzed exactly. More like my neural system forgot how to send signals to my limbs. The haptic suit was screaming warnings. My heads-up display flashed red. 0% combat effectiveness. Eliminated. What did you do to me? I gasped. Riley did not answer. She was already moving toward the stairs where Thrace was descending. Having heard the commotion, the Clixon saw her coming and opened fire, pulse rounds hammering down the stairwell. Riley pressed her glowing hand against the wall. The tattoo pulsed once, and she knew. Somehow, impossibly, she knew exactly where each shot would be before Thrace fired it. She moved through the barrage like she was dancing. Each step precisely calculated, each movement minimal and efficient. Not a single round touched her. She reached the stairs. Thrace realized his mistake too late. He turned to run back up, but Riley was faster. She caught his rear leg, yanked hard, and sent him tumbling down the stairs in a chittering, clicking heap. He crashed into the lobby floor, and before he could recover, Riley had her boot on his thorax. Yield, she said quietly. Thrace's combat indicator dropped to 0. Eliminated. The simulation froze. The blue light from Riley's tattoo began to fade, dimming back to those dark lines that I had noticed at the start of class. She stepped back from Thrace, her breathing steady, not even wind. 3 opponents. Eliminated in under 90 seconds. The simulation dissolved around us, the ruined building and debris fading back into the white walls of the haptic pods. I pulled myself up, my limbs working again now that we were out of the scenario. My chest still ached from the phantom pain of her kick. Bront was staring at Riley like she had just sprouted a second head. Thrace was clicking his mandibles, but no sound was coming out. He looked like his brain had crashed and was trying to reboot. I looked at Riley, really looked at her, at that tattoo on her hand. What is that? I asked. My voice sounded small, scared. What is that mark? Riley glanced down at her hand. The blue glow was completely gone now, but I could see the design clearly for the first time. Geometric patterns that interlocked in ways that hurt to follow, symbols I did not recognize, and at the center what looked like coordinates or maybe a date, rendered in human numerals. She looked back at me. You do not know, should I? Most species in the Institute do their homework on allied military forces. She flexed her hand, and I swear the tattoo shifted slightly, even without the glow. This is a Terra Defense Force combat neural link. Biomechanical interface. It connects directly to my nervous system, my adrenal response, my spatial processing centers. Thrace finally found his voice. That is not possible. Neural interfaces require external hardware, implants. You cannot just put one on your skin. You cannot, Riley agreed. Humans can. Our biology is compatible with certain types of organic circuitry. Something about the way our neurons fire and our immune systems adapt. She paused. Takes 2 years of integration before it fully bonds, and it only works if you survive the process. About 40% do not. The simulation bay door hissed open. The rest of our class was filing out of their pods, chattering about their own scenarios. Then they saw us. Saw Bront slumped against the wall. Saw Thrace, sitting on the floor still trying to process what had happened. saw me standing there like someone had hit me with a stun baton, and they saw Riley standing calm and composed in the center of the bay. Professor Quintix emerged from his observation station, his datapad in hand. His head crest was fully extended, which I had never seen before. Time to elimination, 87 seconds. Efficiency rating, 98.3%. 0 damage sustained. The bay went silent. Cadet Nakamura, Quintix continued, his voice carrying across the entire space. Do you care to explain to the class what they just witnessed? Because I believe several of your fellow students are experiencing some cognitive dissonance. Riley held up her left hand so everyone could see the tattoo clearly. This is a Mark 7 combat link. Standard issue for Terra Defense Force Special Operations personnel. I received mine after the siege of New Calcutta. Kessex, standing near the front of the crowd, made a choking sound. The siege of New Calcutta. That was 4 cycles ago. That was when the Kreth invaded the human colony worlds. That is correct, Riley said. The casualty rate at New Calcutta was 80%, Kessex continued, her voice rising. The humans held a city of 3 million against a Kreth armada for 6 months with no orbital support. Everyone said it was impossible. Everyone said the humans would be wiped out in weeks. Riley nodded slowly. We held for 6 months and 14 days actually. Until the relief fleet arrived. How many combat missions? Professor Quintix asked quietly. Riley met his eyes. 217, sir. Give or take a few I have probably forgotten. The silence in the bay was so complete I could hear my own hearts beating in my chest. Both of them, hammering like war drums. 217 missions, at New Calcutta, where the survival rate for human soldiers was measured in days, not months. Thrace was staring at Riley's hand like it was a weapon pointed at his head, which I suppose it was. Only soldiers who survive New Calcutta get those marks. Only the ones who make it through the entire siege. That is correct, Riley said. Bront pushed himself up from the wall. His voice was quiet, respectful in a way I had never heard from him before.
How old were you?
During the siege, Riley's expression did not change. 17. I turned 18 during the 5th month. 17. She had been 17 years old, fighting for her life in a city under siege for half a year. While I was sitting in a comfortable academy classroom learning basic tactics from a textbook, Professor Quintix stepped forward. Perhaps now the class understands why Cadet Nakamura questioned our retreat protocols earlier. When you have held a position against impossible odds for 6 months, the idea of controlled withdrawal becomes somewhat abstract. He looked at Riley. Thank you for the demonstration, Cadet. I believe you have made your point quite effectively. Riley lowered her hand. Permission to return to my seat, sir. Granted. She walked toward the exit. The crowd of students parted without a word, creating a clear path. No one laughed. No one clicked to their mandibles. No one even breathed loudly. As she passed me, she paused for just a moment. Your flanking strategy was solid, Velcor. You just forgot to account for vertical movement. Work on that. Then she was gone, and I stood there, all 4 of my eyes locked on the empty doorway, wondering how I had been stupid enough to laugh at a survivor of New Calcutta. Professor Quintix waited until Riley was completely gone before he spoke again. His voice was different now, softer, the kind of tone you use when delivering information that needs to be absorbed rather than just heard. I knew Cadet Nakamura's background when I accepted her into this class, he said. I knew about New Calcutta. I knew about the Mark 7 link. I knew that pairing her against 3 opponents was not a challenge for her. It was a lesson for all of you. He turned to face the class, his massive form somehow seeming even larger in the silence. Humans call their planet a death world. They joke about it. They make light of the fact that their gravity is crushing. Their atmosphere is corrosive to most species. Their wildlife considers them prey, and their weather patterns are actively hostile. But they are not joking when they fight. They do not joke when they survive things that would kill any of us 3 times over. Quintix tapped his datapad. That tattoo represents more than 200 confirmed combat missions. 200 times she faced death and walked away. How many combat missions have any of you completed? Real ones, not simulation. No one answered. No one could. I looked down at my own hands. 6 fingers on each. Strong, capable, but they had never held a weapon in actual combat. They had never pulled a trigger knowing that someone would die if I missed. They had never dug through rubble looking for survivors while artillery rained down overhead. Riley's hands had done all of that. Before she was 18 years old. Class dismissed, Professor Quintix said. Next session, we will discuss the psychology of prolonged siege warfare. I expect everyone to come prepared. especially those of you who thought today would be entertaining. The class filed out slowly. No one spoke. No chittering. No clicking. No laughter. I walked back toward the dormitory levels, my mind still replaying the simulation. The way she moved. The way she knew where we would be before we knew ourselves. The way that tattoo glowed like it was alive. Thrace caught up to me in the corridor. He looked shaken. I did not know, he said quietly. About New Calcutta. About any of it. None of us did, I replied. 200 missions, he whispered. How does someone survive 200 missions? I thought about that. About Riley sitting in class taking notes, listening to Professor Quentick's lecture about defensive theory, about her questioning retreat protocols like she had earned the right to question them, because she had earned it in blood and fire and 6 months of hell that none of us could imagine. Deathworld, I said finally. We call Earth a deathworld like it is an insult, like it is a weakness. Thrace clicked his mandibles softly. But it is not, is it? No, I said. It is not. We reached the dormitory junction where our paths split. Thrace headed left toward the Clixon quarters. I went right toward the Threxian section, but I stopped before entering. I looked back down the corridor, toward the simulation bay we had just left. Somewhere in this massive institute, Riley Nakamura was probably doing homework, or studying, or just sitting quietly, that tattoo on her hand a constant reminder of everything she had survived. And tomorrow she would be back in class, taking notes, questioning doctrine, making all of us realize that we knew absolutely nothing about real combat. I had 4 eyes and I had not seen what was right in front of me, but I saw it now. Humans were not weak. They were survivors, and Riley Nakamura had the marks to prove it.